410 kilometers beneath your feet, something is sealed inside rock. Not a cave, not a tunnel, not a gap. A mineral called ringwoodite, blue as sapphire, compressed under pressure so extreme that water molecules split apart and fuse into the crystal lattice itself. Scientists detected it not with cameras or drills, but with earthquake waves. The waves slowed down. That slowdown meant wet rock. Wet rock at that depth means one thing: a hidden water reservoir. The estimate, up to 3 times the volume of every ocean on the surface. And then you open the Book of Enoch, and it says, "The fountains which are beneath the earth." You were told that line was symbolic. Let's look closer. There is a network of more than 2,000 seismometers deployed across the United States. In 2014, researchers at Northwestern University and the University of New Mexico ran earthquake wave data from more than 500 separate seismic events through that network. They were looking for anomalies in how waves behaved at extreme depth. What they found was a slowdown. Seismic waves travel faster through dry rock and slower through wet rock. At the base of the mantle's transition zone, somewhere between 410 and 660 kilometers down, the waves were dragging. The team concluded that the rock at that depth was hydrated. The water was not liquid. It was not ice. It was not vapor. It was chemically bonded inside the molecular structure of a mineral under crushing pressure, stored as hydroxyl ions fused to the crystal lattice. Invisible, unreachable, and massive. Steve Jacobson, the Northwestern geophysicist who co-authored the study, put the volume into words that nobody quite expected. If just 1% of the weight of the rock in that transition zone is water, the total volume would be nearly 3 times all the water in all the surface oceans on Earth combined. The deepest ocean trench on the surface goes to about 11 kilometers. The water Jacobson is describing starts more than 40 times deeper than that. And we are not talking about the Pacific. We are talking about something that has never been seen, never been photographed, never been touched by any instrument ever built. The only physical evidence is one diamond. In 2014, a team led by Graham Pearson at the University of Alberta analyzed a diamond that had been recovered from river gravel in Brazil. Commercially worthless, dirty brown, 3 millimeters wide. Pearson's team had bought it while looking for something else entirely. But inside that diamond, trapped as an inclusion, was a fragment of blue mineral, ringwoodite. The first and only natural specimen of ringwoodite from the Earth's interior ever physically examined, brought to the surface by a volcanic eruption from a depth of roughly 400 miles. Inside it, approximately 1% water by weight. The diamond was a messenger from a zone that no drill has reached, no camera has seen, no human has touched. And what it carried was water. That is where the science ends. And that is exactly where something much older begins. The Book of Enoch was excluded from the Western Bible. You probably know it was excluded. What most people do not know is the sequence of what happened to it. The text circulated widely during the Second Temple period. It was quoted directly in the canonical New Testament, in the Epistle of Jude, as prophecy. Church fathers like Tertullian treated it as authoritative. Then, around the 4th century, Western Christianity stopped listing it. Not banned, not burned, just quietly removed from the approved list, and almost completely forgotten in Europe and the Middle East. But not in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never accepted the removal. They continued treating 1st Enoch as canonical scripture, preserving it in its entirety in Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopic language. For over 1,000 years, while Europe had no complete copy, Ethiopia was reading it every generation. A Scottish explorer named James Bruce brought a copy back to Europe in 1773. The Western scholarly world was stunned. Then, in 1947, in the caves near Qumran, by the Dead Sea, researchers found something that confirmed what Ethiopia had been saying all along. 11 separate Aramaic manuscript copies of 1st Enoch. 11. The Qumran community had copied it more than almost any other text, exceeded in manuscript frequency only by Psalms, Deuteronomy, and Isaiah. This was not a fringe document. This was one of the most widely read texts in ancient Israel. And the oldest sections of it, the Book of Watchers, chapters 1 through 36, date to at least the 3rd century BCE. Paleographic analysis of the Qumran fragments confirms it. This text was ancient before Rome was an empire, before the New Testament was written, before the canon debates that excluded it even existed. The Book of Enoch is not a medieval invention. It is not a late Christian embellishment. It is a pre-Common Era Jewish document. And inside it, in chapter 18, a man describes what he saw when he reached the foundations of the world. He does not say he was told about them. He says he saw them. I saw the treasuries of all the winds. I saw how he had furnished with them the whole creation and the firm foundations of the earth. And I saw the cornerstone of the earth. Stop for a moment on that verb. Saw, witnessed, walked to, arrived at. Chapter 18 is not a theological description from a mountaintop vision. It reads like a survey report. Enoch is moving through space. He is observing specific structures. He sees the cornerstone of the earth, which implies he is at the edge of something structural, not floating in an abstract heaven. He watches winds stretch out the vaults of the sky and station themselves between heaven and earth like pillars. He describes movement. He describes direction. He describes arrival. And then, in verse 11 of chapter 18, in the Richard Lawrence translation from the Ethiopic Ge'ez, he writes this: I saw a place on the other side of an extended territory, where waters were collected. I likewise beheld terrestrial fountains, deep in the fiery columns of heaven. Terrestrial fountains, not celestial, not symbolic. The word used is terrestrial, of the earth, and they are deep. And they are in proximity to something described as fiery columns. An ancient writer walking to the foundations of the world, looking across a territory, and seeing water collected underground near columns of fire. That is not how allegory usually reads. The official interpretation says it is. Scholars treat 1 Enoch, chapter 18, as standard apocalyptic vision literature, elaborate cosmic imagery meant to convey the scope of divine authority. The physical language is a feature of the genre, not a geographic claim. The ancient Near Eastern tradition of the cosmic journey, the katabasis, routinely uses vivid physical description as theological theater. None of this is unusual. None of it is meant to be taken as a map. That explanation is reasonable. It is well supported, and it covers most of the passage. But it does not cover the direction. Because in chapter 54, verse 7, the Book of Enoch gets more specific. Not the symbolic deep, not the general abyss. This: he will open all the chambers of waters which are above the heavens, and of the fountains which are beneath the earth. 2 reservoirs, 2 directions, water above the heavens and water beneath the earth. Separated, distinct, and described not as symbols of judgment, but as mechanisms. Things that can be opened, things that can be closed. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 2, after the flood, the text says the fountains of the deep were closed. Same language, same implication. A mechanism with an open state and a closed state is not a metaphor. A metaphor does not have a valve. The Hebrew word in Genesis for that underground water is tehom. It is a spatial word, directional, below. The fountains of Tehom burst open, the flood happened, and then the fountains of Tehom were closed. Genesis treats this underground water as something with a location and a mechanism. Enoch does the same thing, in more detail, and from the position of someone who claims to have walked there and looked at the foundations with his own eyes. That is the problem. That is the part the official explanation does not make comfortable. And this is where it gets more uncomfortable. The R.H. Charles translation and the Richard Lawrence translation of 1 Enoch do not agree on everything. They are both working from the Ethiopic Ge'ez, which is itself a translation from Greek, which was translated from the original Aramaic. The Aramaic fragments found at Qumran cover approximately 1/5 of the Ethiopic text. That means roughly 4/5 of the Ethiopic version has no surviving Aramaic counterpart to check against. The most physically specific language in 1 Enoch 18, the language about terrestrial fountains deep in the fiery columns, the description of where waters are collected beneath the earth, exists in the version we cannot fully verify against the oldest surviving manuscripts. Not because someone removed the Aramaic, because the Aramaic fragments for that section were not preserved among the 11 Cave 4 copies. The most disturbing physical language in the text sits in a section with no original language checkpoint. That is not proof of anything. It is a gap. And in a case built this tightly, gaps matter. Now hold the science beside the text. The Ringwoodite transition zone sits at a depth of 410 to 660 kilometers. The rock there reaches temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The water inside it is not liquid. It is chemically trapped, squeezed into crystal structure under a pressure that prevents it from behaving like water at all. It is sealed, not locked behind a door, not contained in a cave, but sealed by the physics of extreme depth. It cannot escape without a change in pressure. And Jacobson's team found evidence that at the lower boundary of the transition zone, where ringwoodite breaks down and reforms into minerals that cannot hold as much water, some of that water is released and causes localized melting. The water can, in certain conditions, be released. The mechanism involves pressure change, mineral transition, and the movement of rock through the transition zone driven by plate tectonics. A sealed reservoir, a mechanism of release, a location beneath the foundations. Now read 1 Enoch chapter 54 verse 7 again. He will open all the chambers of waters which are above the heavens, and of the fountains which are beneath the earth, and all the waters shall be joined with the waters. This does not prove anything. Let that be stated clearly. The ancient writer did not know about ringwoodite. He did not know about seismic waves. He did not know about hydroxyl ions or phase transitions at 660 kilometers of depth. These are modern concepts that no ancient cosmology contained. But the structure of the claim is what matters here. The ancient claim is that there is water stored beneath the foundations of the earth. Enormous water, in a sealed condition, that can be opened. The modern discovery is that there is water stored beneath the foundations of the earth. Enormous water, chemically sealed inside rock. That can be released when pressure changes. The words are different. The mechanisms are different. The historical contexts are entirely different. But the shape of the claim is the same. Direction, down. Location, beneath the foundations. State, sealed. Scale, larger than what is on the surface. One detail could be metaphor. Two could be coincidence. But direction, containment, mechanism, and scale, appearing together in a 2,300-year-old excluded document and in a peer-reviewed study published in Science in 2014, is a structural pattern. The metaphor explanation handles the theology. It does not handle the geometry. And then there is what the text says in 1 Enoch, chapter 60, verse 11. Enoch asks an angel to show him the hidden things, the structure of the world, the water below. The angel responds, "Herein thou dost seek to know what is hidden." The knowledge of the deep structure is described by the text itself as secret, not prohibited, not forbidden to all, but hidden, beneath inquiry, something that takes a specific journey to approach. The angel tells Enoch what is hidden in the height and beneath the earth in the depth. And then Enoch describes the fountains. Consider the detection method used in 2014. A network of 2,000 seismometers reading the behavior of earthquake waves through rock 400 miles down. No drill, no camera, no direct observation. The water revealed itself only by making the waves slow down. The only way to know it was there was to send a signal through the Earth and listen to how it changed. The detection method for the most significant water discovery in modern geology required reading vibrations, not seeing, not touching. Listening to the ground changed the signal. 2,000 seismometers and 500 earthquakes to detect something the instruments cannot reach, and a 3 mm brown diamond found in river gravel that happened to carry a blue fragment from 400 miles down. That is the entire physical evidence chain for the largest water reservoir on Earth. One diamond, and vibrations. The deepest drill hole ever completed by human beings reached 12 kilometers. That is the Kola super deep borehole in Russia, drilled over 2 decades and finally abandoned in 1992 when the heat became unmanageable. 12 kilometers. The transition zone begins at 410. No instrument has ever physically reached what Jacobson's seismometers described. No human technology has come within 33 times the distance of what is down there. Everything below 12 kilometers is inference. Seismic inference, mathematical modeling, one accidental diamond. The official explanation for first Enoch's subterranean water is that it belongs to an ancient cosmological framework shared across the ancient Near East. A mythological subterranean ocean beneath a flat Earth, a standard feature of pre-scientific cultures trying to explain where springs and floods came from. That framework is real. It is documented. The Babylonian tradition, the Ugaritic tradition, the Genesis tradition, and the Enochic tradition all participate in some version of it. Scholars are correct that this context exists. What the context does not explain is why the description keeps getting more specific. Why Enoch does not describe the underground water as a passive mythological feature. Why he describes it as something with chambers, with fountains that imply active sourcing, with a location beneath the foundations that he physically walked toward and observed. Why the passage separates the water above from the water below with 2 different directions and treats both as distinct mechanisms. Ancient cosmological frameworks do not usually need that much spatial detail to carry a theological point. The text did not change. The interpretation changed. The word beneath is still there. The word fountains is still there. The word chambers is still there. Every translation that has ever been made of this passage, from Lawrence in 1821 to Charles in 1917, to every modern scholar who has worked from the Ge'ez, agrees that the direction is downward and the description is underground. Symbolic readings are assigned by later interpreters. The text assigns a direction. 410 kilometers beneath the surface, the transition zone is still there. Still sealed, still unvisited, still detectable only through the behavior of sound waves in rock. The Ringwoodite crystal is still there, still blue, still holding water in its lattice at temperatures that would incinerate any surface material, at pressures that would crush any instrument ever built. It has been there for billions of years. The water was sealed before the first human civilization existed, before the first city, before the first written language, before Enoch. And at least 2,300 years ago, a writer whose text was later excluded from the Western Bible, preserved in a single African church, and rediscovered in 11 cave manuscripts in 1947, described walking to the foundations of the earth and seeing fountains. Beneath, in proximity to fire and heat, in a zone he described as the place where the structures of the world were laid, where the cornerstone was, where the deep things were held. The geologists call it the transition zone. The text called it the foundations. The science says it is sealed by pressure. The text says it was sealed by design. Neither description can be reached by any drill. Neither can be seen by any camera. One was detected by reading earthquake waves through 500 square miles of instrumented rock. The other was recorded by a man who said, "I saw." The transition zone is still there. The text still says what it says. The deepest drill reached 12 kilometers. Everything below that is something we infer, something we calculate, something we read in the behavior of vibrations. and something an ancient excluded document describes as the foundations of the earth, where waters were collected, deep and below, in a place no ordinary inquiry was meant to reach. The answer is not there yet. Maybe it never will be. But the direction keeps pointing the same way, straight down.